Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Well, hi there, folks. It's Bob with Nick. Hello, Nick.
Hey, everybody.
And we're happy to be back. And we are very happy to have this episode's guest on with us. It's Steven Gardner. And, our show is From Akron and Beyond. We're kind of going...
But real beyond.
We're going backwards this time. It's the inverse because we're kind of going way beyond to
San Diego,
California, to speak with our guest who has written and is still writing an absolute amazing, complete history of punk rock music, new wave music. It's called Another Tuneless Racket. I believe it's up to 5 volumes now. Am I correct, Stephen?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Oh, man. And these aren't just volume, books. They're like, what, 600-700 pages?
They're tomes. Yeah. Yes. So anyway, our guest is Steven Gardner, and I probably should have been more graceful in my introduction. Hi there, Steven. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be on the show. I appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate it as well. So I first heard about these books from Nick. And so, Nick, tell us about how you came across them.
Well, I had a phone call from, email, then followed with a phone call from Steve a few years ago. I think it was before COVID, wasn't it, Steve?
Yeah, that's right. I think it was 2018 or 19, maybe.
Yeah, and you were writing on the, history of punk and the Bizarros, Clone Records. Were lucky enough to appear early, 76, and that was that was like a cutoff time, right? You wanted the earliest bands that recorded first, correct?
Yeah, my idea at first was to write a volume per year.
Oh,
well, actually, my idea at first was to write one volume, and it's gotten completely out of control now. But yeah, it was to write one for each year. And the Bizarros, like you said, had a record in 76, and it was a really good record. And I always thought that your band was a very underrated group and deserved to be mentioned along with a lot of the other pioneering bands of the time. And so to me, that's one of the important things about these books is that the story of punk rock in the 70s has kind of focused around a bunch of like headline bands like The Clash and the Pistols and Ramones, and they all deserve their place in this, so I'm not trying to cut them down at all, but it's like they don't deserve it to the exclusion of everybody else. And there were, a lot of getting that kind of position has to do with being in the right place for getting publicity and everything, and it's partly about the quality of the music, but it's not completely about it.
Well, speaking of being in the right place, how did you get to the right place, Stephen, to be interested in this music? I'm just curious.
Great question, Bob.
When do you? Well, first of all, where are you from originally, if I may ask?
Well, I believe it or not, I come from a little town in southern Vermont.
Ah, okay.
And music there generally meant country and western music.
Sure.
And I didn't care for that at all. To me, that was redneck music. And Vermont in those days, this is like the 60s. Vermont was a very parochial place where, it was your family against other people's families in your village. And then it was your village against the neighboring village and your town against the neighboring town. And people from somewhere else weren't especially welcomed.
Okay.
And so my father was not from New York, and my mother was from Norway, and so she might as well have been from another planet. and so the whole outsider thing of punk rock, when I first started hearing it, really appealed to me, and it made a lot of sense to me right away. Even though you normally don't think of a punk rock guy as being a guy from a rural place, and
true,
urban music. So
we were so honored to be featured in such great length in your volume 2 of your expanding universe of books. But then when I got a few weeks ago, when I got a copy of volume 4, you go so far beyond that. I mean, you have a lot of the the lesser known Ohio and some of the Akron bands in there too.
Yeah, well, if you ever read my Noise for Heroes fanzine, which I did starting in late 1980 and continued on for 15 years after that or so, my goal was always covering bands that I thought were deserving but weren't getting coverage somewhere else. And so I didn't try to ignore everybody else, but I tried to put the bands that were not that well known in context with the bands that were well known. So Devo is in Volume 4, for example, and there's things I like about Devo and there's things that I don't like about them. But I think in terms of just quality of music, you look at a band like Tim Huey, for example. They're right up there as far as I'm concerned. They are very inventive and creative, and and in a fair world, they would be known just about as much as Devo, I think.
I called Harvey after I read some of his quotations in Volume 4, and he was real excited about it. But I noticed too, in the collection of the books that you've written, besides another Tuneless Racket, some of your Noise for Heroes have been compiled in books too, right?
Yeah, so, during COVID, there's a lot of uncertainty about what was going to happen long term, and, none of us are getting any younger, and so we're all in a kind of vulnerable class for that. And so one of the things I kind of have in the back of my mind is to write a book about Australian rock and roll bands, because that was a big focus for me in the 80s. And I thought, geez, I'm not going to get a chance to do this possibly, and maybe I better just put out all of the Noise for Heroes instead, because they have tons of articles about those bands.
Is that like Radio Birdman, those type of bands?
Yeah, it's important that
the Saints.
Probably. That, people always go, "Oh, Australian bands, you mean Men at Work, right?" And I'm like, no, that's not really what I'm talking about. And so, it's the bands that sort of spun out from Radio Birdman and the Saints, and then there were all these independent record labels in Australia in the 80s. The foremost of them was probably Citadel Records, which was founded by a guy who was a friend and sort of in the circle of Radio Birdman. And but there were others like Waterfront and Aberrant and Greasy Pop Records in Adelaide and A Go-Go in Melbourne. And these labels put out just tons of fantastic records. And they're not what you would call punk records, but they have the spirit of punk. It's like bands that they know they're not going to make $1 zillion doing this. They do it because they love it.
Right.
And, it's maybe a little more pop-oriented than a punk band would be. But the same way I like the 70s punk, because it's got such a wide range of styles associated with it. It's not like what hardcore became later on or something where it's just very regimented and straitjacketed.
Yeah.
The Australian underground scene of the 80s was similar. There was all kinds of different bands, and it was really innovative. And not too many people seem to catch on to it, and it seems like it's kind of disappearing these days. Like some musics make a comeback later on, and they become popular after the fact. And the Australian bands seem to me like they're going in the other direction, which is kind of unfortunate because they were really good.
People out that aren't familiar with these books, they're so scholarly. I mean, footnotes. It's almost like, it was. How would you describe it, Bob? The way that his writing is. I mean, it's so thorough.
Yeah, it's thorough. I mean, but they're not academic. They're very readable.
Yeah, right.
Enjoyable. But you've obviously done your homework, Steven. So I want to get back here. Now we left you somewhere in Vermont.
Oh yeah.
and so somehow from Vermont, you've ended up in California. Now I'm sure it's a long story and probably too involved to go into all the details, but I'm just curious. I mean, basically how has your life transpired in this way? And I know you played in bands too, right? You ultimately were in bands. So
another drummer, Bob.
Another drummer. Yep. Yes, there's many drummers. Right. If you can just give us just a cursory kind of rundown of basically what happened to you after you got out of high school.
Well, so I went to the University of Massachusetts in the fall of '72, and I went there to study electrical engineering. And so to me, that was a big eye-opener because, like, in Vermont, the only radio station we could ever get that played anything like rock and roll was we'd get WNEW on AM radio at night. And you couldn't get it during the daytime, but only at night. And so I got a lot of British Invasion and soul music from that. My brother, who's a couple years older than me, went to University of Vermont, and he came back from there with albums by The Who and Slade that made a huge impact on me. To this day, The Who is probably my favorite pre-punk band, and where there's a lot of people say that the Stooges were a huge influence on them, The Who is a huge influence on me.
Wow.
That kind of thing. So anyway, at UMass, though, I could all of a sudden get FM radio stations and listen to all kinds of different things. And so it kind of made my head spin to get exposed to so much stuff. So there was a record store in Amherst, Mass. that was run by a guy who was a total Bruce Springsteen fanatic. So I got into Bruce Springsteen and then Southside Johnny and then Patti Smith Group after that and Graham Parker. And my path was kind of from Parker, Dr. Feelgood, Talking Heads, Elvis Costello, and then I got the Sex Pistols.
Right.
And it was like,
yeah.
And so
those were exciting. I mean, I know it's traipsing down memory lane, and you know sometimes we can get tiresome to younger people probably to hear us old people talking like about this stuff. But I mean, it was an exciting time. I mean, I worked in record stores at that time, and it was just, you know, we'd get a box in and we'd open it up and would be all these weird colored vinyl singles and 10 inches and stuff from England, and these covers with these bands that just looked like they were, you know, struck us as being like just from an absolute alien existence, you know, and the music was so fresh and so new.
Those are the times, remember?
It was exciting,
Looking at the first, you know, whether it was the first Ramones album or the first Patti Smith album cover, you know, in the community store, to all the kind of stuff you're talking about, Bob, where Steven wrote in one of his books about Hiddeo's Discodrome in Cleveland. You know?
Right. Well, and there were record stores like that all over the country, and I mean, I just remember hearing you talk about what you were listening to, Steven. I just remember, like, you know, opening a box and seeing this like Sex Pistols single, and just like it really looked like contraband to me. You know, it was like, what is this? This thing almost seems like it should be illegal. Then I bought it and I loved it.
I remember the first Slits 45.
Yeah.
The first time I heard the Pistols was in that record shop I was talking about, and the guy played the 12-inch French release of Anarchy in the UK.
Okay.
And I thought, wow, this must be a new Who bootleg, and they've kind of gone back from like Who by Numbers or something like that, and gone back to where they were good.
Right. Like that early stuff. They were kind of like a first punk band, right? In a sense. I mean, if you listen to the very early Who stuff.
The lyrics.
Yeah, everything. Yeah.
And the thing I liked about the Who a lot is, you know, a large part of what I like about punk is the lyrics, that there are, the lyrics are not like a bunch of stuff about conquest of women and things like that. There's a lot of like self-doubt and questions about where you stand in things. And I think back to Who songs like Substitute, or from Quadrophenia, The Real Me, or, you know, all these kinds of things. And those songs really connected with me. And it's the same way with the punk songs.
Yeah. And one other thing about this is I think that those bands, now maybe I'm naive here, but I think that those bands, you know, particularly in the very early days, I mean, they were being motivated by artistic impulses and a need to express themselves. They weren't adopting a style that they thought was going to make them famous and rich, right? You know, and I think that makes a difference. And you can tell, and frankly, even those bands, for the most part, end up changing as they start getting notoriety and they start getting some money and some fame and stuff. You know, the later stuff doesn't tend to still have that spark that the very earliest records did.
Well, take that forward a few years to, you know, some of Steven's books, you know, the diversity of the New York bands that were DIY to the Ohio bands. None of them were in a mold, I mean, Talking Heads, or Ramones, Patti Smith.
Right.
And then you throw Devo, the Bizarros, and Unit 5 and Tin Huey. I mean, you couldn't say there was a New York scene as far as the sound.
No.
It was, they hung out at CBGB's.
Well, that's the classic thing is people talk about the punk rock at CBGB's, and they always name the same groups.
Yeah.
Blondie, Ramones, Talking Heads, Television, 4 bands that sound not alike at all.
At all. And back to the Akron band, same way.
And same way, right.
The thing I like about the punk from that era, and so many people that I know, even today, I think punk is one of the most misunderstood music forms there is out there, because the average person only knows about the hardcore bands, and they think about violence and everything, although punk might have had Sid Vicious, but it didn't have Charles Manson or Altamont.
True.
But the things I like about punk is Patti Smith says, and there's a lyric in one of her songs that goes, "This is the era where everybody creates." And I really like that idea. It's like, people might not have been able to play in bands themselves, but they'd write fanzines, they'd open clubs, they'd manage other bands, they'd start record labels, they'd do all these different things which never had been done before on that kind of a scale. And
sometimes people couldn't actually even play an instrument, and they ended up in bands.
Exactly. Yeah. And the key was figure out what you can do and what you're able to do, and do something. And, And I think that's a really empowering kind of idea.
Yeah.
The idea that, it's okay to fail, but it's not okay to not try.
Right, right. Nice, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, Steven, when you begin writing the first paragraphs of Another Tuneless Racket, Volume 1, did you have any idea it was going to turn into such a mammoth undertaking?
No, I didn't. I was completely naive about it, and I often think about. So when I was a kid, I was a Tolkien fan, and in the introduction to The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien says, "The tale grew in the telling," and that's how I feel.
No kidding.
It's like you get started, and I'm kind of worried now because I'm starting to work on Volume 6, which is about bands that are not from either the UK or the US. So it's Canadian, Australian, New Zealand, but then European bands from like Finland, Sweden, Norway, Holland, Belgium, France, and Germany, and places like that. And so the way that I get started with this is that I get, the first step is to get organized and sort of make an outline that says, here's what you're going to write about, and here's all the bands you need to talk about. And I spend time. I mean, one of the things when you start going into these bands in Europe and everything is, I haven't heard all this stuff yet. I've heard quite a lot of it, but I have to go find a lot of it.
That's what I was going to ask, because when you started off, you were writing from knowledge that you probably had primarily in your head already, right? Whereas, I mean, if you're talking about some of these other countries, I would think you're having to do some research, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I do know probably more about these things than like the average American punk fan, but
I'm gonna speculate that you do. Yes,
it's not even 20% of what I need to know. So there's a ton of research to be done for sure.
Yeah, well, it's an awesome undertaking on your part to write this kind of completist history. It's a valuable thing for sure. And as Nick has pointed out, and I will point out to our listeners, these books are very fun to read. I mean, and they're kind of, you can read them, from page 1 to page 800 or whatever. But you don't have to. You can kind of go through and just look at chapters that interest you and bands that interest you, and you'll probably end up reading the whole book ultimately anyway. But yeah, they're very accessible. I don't want them to come across as being too, scholarly in
no
nature.
Way. They're just
Well, I appreciate that, because that was a goal of mine. I mean, there's a lot of like rock encyclopedia type books out there, and I didn't want it to be like that. I wanted it to be something that felt a little bit more alive, and
sure.
that that told stories of people, and so I try to interview a lot of people. Like I think I interviewed about 20 people for Volume 4.
Wow.
And so, I think that helps it quite a lot.
Yeah, I was so happy to see that you interviewed Jim Ellis from Cleveland, who put out this great fanzine called Clee Magazine, and he was sort of a unsung hero,
Yeah, those are the kinds of guys that I felt like I had to go track down and talk to people who were important on the scene, but didn't get mentioned. And every city had guys like that. So, like in Boston, I talked to Peter Dayton of La Peste, and I talked to Frank. I'm forgetting his last name now, of Classic Ruins, Frank Rowe. And these guys have great stories to tell, and and one of the things I like too about talking to these kinds of people is that they have a perspective that goes across the scene, maybe more than the bands that dominate the scene do, because the bands that dominated the scene, they're like so focused on what they're doing, they don't see all of the smaller things going on.
Right. Did you do much traveling to do this book, or are you calling people? How are you contacting everybody?
Yeah, so I do the interviews mostly over the phone, which is, I used to do interviews over the phone back in the 80s for Noise for Heroes, and they'd get a phone bill for, $100 for the interview that I did, in a time when $100 was real money.
Right.
And now it's like...
you talking to all these Australian people.
Yeah, exactly.
When did you pick up the drumsticks?
Well, if you ever got to meet me in person, I'm 6'8", and so I used to play a lot of basketball when I was younger. And so in 1986, I had a really bad knee injury and couldn't play anymore. And so I thought, what am I going to do with my spare time now? And I'd always wanted to try to play drums. But I was, I always thought I had no musical ability whatsoever. And I proved it, but I didn't stop me from playing drums. And so I started playing drums, and within like 6 months, I was in a band playing in this club in San Diego called the Spirit Club, which was, it had been a place where all kinds of fantastic bands came through town and played. And I remember seeing the Fleshtones there and Stiff Little Fingers and bands like that. And all of the San Diego bands played there, too. And so I was like all jazzed and excited about this. We had this Wednesday night show at 11 o'clock, and we come on, and it's like there's 3 of our friends there, and that's it.
Welcome to the club.
A typical story.
Yeah,
typical,
right.
Yeah.
But anyway, I gradually got better, and by the 90s, the Gamma Man, the band I was in at that point, was, I think, pretty good. But we didn't have connections to, like, the local scene or anything, despite my writing Noise for Heroes and all of that. And so we didn't draw people, and it's all about drawing people to get into clubs.
Yeah.
It's like, if you don't draw people, you can be the best band in the world, and you're still going to get Tuesday night at late night.
Right.
So anyway, we made a bunch of CDs, and it was pretty fun. But after a while, I sort of found by the time I'd made the 4th CD I was on that we'd make these CDs, and I would never listen to them again. And I'd go, well, why am I doing this?
And so Nick told me that before we were on, and I should point out that this is from Akron and beyond, and I'm Bob Ethington with Nick Nicholas, and we're talking with our guest author, Steven Gardner. Nick did mention to me before we were on air that you work with computers. Am I correct?
Well, so I'm kind of I'm retired now, but I was kind of an esoteric communications system engineer.
Okay.
And like the last job that I had, I designed satellite communication systems for getting internet to people in rural areas and things like that.
Great. Okay.
And so it's a very different thing from the whole music thing. And the music has always been like really important to me. And in fact, if I look back on my life now and say, what did I do that was important? It's all the musical things I did that were important.
Sure.
When you work in technology, it's like everything you do is obsolete in a year and a half, and it's gone. And there's no sign that you were ever there before. And so,
wow, yeah, it's very true.
It's kind of discouraging because it's very hard work, and you work long hours and everything, and they pay you well, but in the end, you go, what did I do this for?
So, well, it gave you the means to be able to work on these books, right?
That's
so
exactly
look at it that way. So you are working on a 6th volume, you said? Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm really afraid it might split into 2, but I'm going to try to keep it from doing that because I want to get on and write this Australian book too after I finish that.
Right.
And,
I was looking at your biography here, and besides the music books, you're working on a non-music book called Pieces of Rope Too Short to Keep.
Oh, that's been done for a long time. That was actually the first book I wrote, and I did it kind of as just a experiment to see if I could actually bring a book to completion. And so it's about what it was like to grow up in Vermont, and it's just a bunch of childhood stories. And it used to be that I did a lot of traveling for work, and so I'd be on planes all the time coming back from meetings on the East Coast or something, and kind of bored, and so I would write another, 3 or 4 pages about some event that happened to pop into my head. So by the time I retired, I had this collection of 400 pages of stuff that none of it went together, and it was written over 20 years' time, and so stylistically it was all over the map. And so the first thing that I did in writing was to pull this book together and make an actual book out of it. And
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, but it was
kind of.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say it was a kind of a trial run for you then to know that you could do it, right? And start.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people think about writing books, and the question is, can they actually finish the whole project? Because there's you have the inspiration and the idea of what you're going to do, and that's like 5% of it, and like they always say, it's 5% inspiration and 95% perspiration.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you have to do all of the other stuff to get it done, and a lot of people stall out and never finish.
Sure.
Fortunately for me, one of the traits you have to survive in the career that I had is that you work on projects that last for a long time. Like I very frequently worked on things that would take 4 or 5 years to finish.
Wow.
And so the idea of working on something where you're making like these almost invisible incremental steps of progress every day, that's something I'm very used to. And so writing a big book doesn't really daunt me very much.
Wow.
Now, I'm just curious, as we're talking about your writing process. So have you found that writing has gotten easier? Like, let's say, is writing volume 4 of Another Tuneless Racket, was that an easier endeavor for you than writing volume 1?
Well, it was harder from the perspective of the amount of information that I had to go out and get, because the bands that I was writing about didn't have much said about them a lot of times, and so I really had to dig to do research for them. Mm-hmm. But my writing is definitely improving as I'm going along, and it's worth keeping in mind, too, that I had experience writing I wrote 23 issues of Noise for Heroes in print.
Right.
Then I did it online. Then I wrote for the Big Takeover for quite a while. So I had quite a bit of writing experience for smaller scale things up to that point. But I still find that, it used to be the case that if I proofread one of these volumes, like when I proofread volume 1 or 2, I had to read the book 8 times before I got to the point where the number of mistakes in it was tolerable.
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's a lot like being in a band and going into a recording studio. Every band you ever talk to, when they come out of the recording studio, they're all unhappy about how they made a whole bunch of mistakes in the song, and you listen to it and you think, "Wow, this is great."
Yeah, we don't know.
hopefully it's that way with the books too, because every time I pick one of them up and I read 2 pages, I find something that I don't like. But there's less of that now than there used to be. It just seems like I'm aware of the kinds of things I tend to do wrong and don't do them because of that. So that helps.
Right. Well, that's it's good. You're learning then. You're growing as an artist. Yeah. As you were saying that, I was just thinking about, like, I recently was working on an album that I'm involved in, and we recorded it all in like a very short amount of time. But we actually ended up joking about it. We spent like about 25 times more time on the cover than we did recording the music. And so much of it was formatting it and then looking at it and like, that doesn't look good, that doesn't look right. And wait, you misspelled my name,
That's the easy part, though.
Yeah, so you start to get blind after a while because you're looking at stuff over and over again. And with the length of your books and the detail of them, I can imagine proofreading is quite a challenge.
Oh, man, yeah.
Yeah, it's like there's as much work in proofreading as there is in writing in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, well, Steven, it's been great talking with you, and we appreciate your time, and we definitely want everyone listening to this to be aware of these books. The series
They're amazing.
Another Tuneless Racket by Steven Gardner. There are currently 5 volumes with a 6th coming. Do you have any idea how many there will be ultimately? Do you even think that way?
Well, I think that the 6th one is going to be the last one.
You think?
Yeah.
I think I'll have covered everything by then.
We'll see. I'm betting on a number 7. Right.
And for everybody out there too, I got my copies on Amazon, so it's easy. They're easy to get.
Yeah, you can get them easy enough. So anyway, again, thanks so much for being our guest, Steve. It's been a
pleasure, man.
Great time talking to you.
Okay, well, same for me. I really enjoyed it.
Great.
So take care.
Okay, bye-bye. And this has been From Akron and Beyond with Nick Nicholas. I'm Bob Ethington. We'll see you next time.
See you later.